Hey there, it's Denise, and this is an Ask Denise video. I was asked to talk about pelvic floor function, so I think because we're yogis, I decided to relate it to breath function because they actually work together. In some resources, you might even hear the respiratory diaphragm, or actually you'll hear it called the respiratory diaphragm, but what you'll hear the pelvic floor called will be the pelvic diaphragm. And that is because they, while not being all that similar in structure, they do function together, and they also could be considered sort of slings or whatever. They, part connective tissue, part muscle, etc. And they actually mirror each other. So you probably know that when you inhale, typically, your diaphragm flattens and it creates more capacity in the thorax. And when you inhale, your pelvic floor also flattens slightly or depresses, or they actually move in tandem together. So if I'm inhaling, I'm going to have this downward pressure on both those structures. And when I exhale, I'm going to get a lifting of my diaphragm and a lifting of my pelvic floor. So that is how they are meant to function together. And of course, I'm sure you're aware that the diaphragm needs to fully expand and contract, that it needs to have full excursion. And we end up limiting the excursion of the diaphragm when we're really stressed out, for instance. So that's one case. You've probably heard of apical breathing. So people tend to confine the breath to the upper aspect of the lungs, and they don't fully let the diaphragm move. All breathing is diaphragmatic breathing, but there's more or less movement of the diaphragm. And when we start to restrict the movement of the diaphragm, it's going to have an effect on the pelvic floor. Another case where these two are operating together is in sitting poses, or not even poses, but posture, like say at a desk or at the dinner table or wherever else you sit. We often sit in such a way where the thorax comes down and it starts to restrict the movement of the diaphragm. So I'm sure if you tried this in your body right now with an extended spine, you find that, wow, I can actually get quite a deep breath. But if I bring it down here, it's going to be much harder to get a full deep breath. So people often fall into those postures unconsciously after being on a desk for quite a while. So if you do sitting positions, or you're stressed out and you start to limit the movement of the diaphragm, it is going to impact the pelvic floor. Plus, when we sit, the pelvic floor is pretty much completely shut off. And the more it's shut off, the less active and quick to act and respond it's going to be. So I'm going to suggest a few things you can do. So number one, make sure you get your body in a good position as much as possible. And then the other thing is, let's deal with that state of stress. So using a lovely Coregeous ball that was developed by Jill Miller can be a way of very gently working with that. It's de-stressing for the nervous system, and also kind of helps the tissue kind of want to soften and release. So for here, I would actually recommend a few different points, but you're going to push your belly wall into the ball and then soften everything on top of it. And you can work around, you don't have to work on any tender areas even, just work around the tissue, take those deep breaths. This is going to help get the diaphragm moving again. So that's a very simple way to begin. Then I recommend going into a supine position and starting to sense how much your diaphragm is moving. So at first, after releasing like that, you can start just feeling your lower ribs as you inhale. Bring your belly into your breath into your belly, let it swell. So at this point, when my belly is swelling, my diaphragm has flattened down. And then as I exhale, my belly will soften, and I might even be able to carve along those lower ribs. And I can just play with that for a few times, push my belly out, and then let it soften and release, and just see if I can start exploring my diaphragm here. I do this a fair bit, so I'm able to get my fingers way under there, and I can just, actually, it feels so good. My breath actually feels so expansive after. But if that's a little too scary for you, don't worry. There's lots of other things we can do. So after kind of getting in touch with your diaphragm, then I recommend taking a few breaths in this position. One hand way down here above my pubic bone, but just so that I can sort of get a bit more sensory awareness there. And my other hand at my low ribs, so I'm not interfering with my belly swelling. So I'm going to take a few abdominal breaths. As I inhale, I want to imagine that I can feel my diaphragm flattening and descending, and the same thing happening at my pelvic floor. So it may take a few breaths before you get even some sensitivity to that. Then I recommend moving into more of an ujjayi breath. All right, and in ujjayi breath, we're going to actually activate our inseams. So we can do that very simply by pressing into the feet a little bit and just intentionally activating the inseams of the legs. I want to imagine that tension moving through my pelvic floor and up my core, just like we would do in ujjayi breathing. Then I'll keep my other hand at my rib cage. So feeling that tension, drawing it through my pelvic floor and up. Then I'll take a nice deep breath. And I'll notice my breath is going to go somewhere else now. It's not going to go into my abdomen, or it's not going to pop my abdomen out anyway. It's going to expand into my lungs this way. So I want to just stay with that and practice that a few times. So pulling up through the inseams of my legs and my pelvic floor, letting that be an anchor for my breath, spreading my ribs this way, and then letting it go. You will find, especially if you're new to this, when you are on the exhalation where the pelvic floor is naturally rising up, that might be the start for you. That might be the first place where you can hold that intention. You can think of it as holding Mula Bandha if you like, but that might be the place. And then see if you can maintain that while you take inhale and exhale. But it really is starting from inseams of your legs and through your pelvic floor. Then you can play with your feet. You can see, can I maintain that integrity at the pelvic floor as I lift one foot at a time? Can I do that if I lift both feet? Can I, go into something a bit more strenuous? So, this is really dealing now with, it's making my pelvic floor part of my core canister. And of course, we know it's not confined to the abdomen. It's actually all the way up the inseams of your legs, all the way up to the roof of your mouth. So we're really working with all of that and trying to sensitize it. Then when you come up into other lunge poses and whatnot, you're keeping those inseams active, making your inseams part of how you find that activity in the pelvic floor, linking it to your ujjayi breath, and you're going to start developing a pathway. I want to encourage you because it does take a while to establish that communication. You really do have to just kind of get with yourself and spend some time with it. Become sensitive to it, and then you'll be able to start tapping into it much faster. So it all takes practice. It all takes determination. I want to encourage you to keep at it until you get there. You can get there. All right? Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. I said see you next time. That's good enough.